If you're retiring with both a pension and Social Security, there are three things you absolutely need to understand before you make any decisions. If these decisions are not coordinated carefully, some retirees end up paying far more in taxes over retirement than they ever needed to, quietly handing money back to the IRS for decades without realizing it. Get them right, and you protect the retirement income you worked decades to build, keeping more of what is yours, and you give yourself the kind of flexibility, well, that makes a 30-year retirement feel like an advantage instead of a countdown. Hi, I'm John Amarino, president of Securus Financial, and I've spent years working specifically with pension holders who walked into retirement feeling confident until we sat down together and mapped out what these three planning gaps were actually costing them. Stick with me because the third one is the most significant planning challenge I see, and it builds so slowly that most people never see it coming until it's too late to do much about it. Furthermore, if you're a public employee, a teacher, a firefighter, a police officer, or a government worker, there's something you need to hear right now before we get into anything else. A law called the Social Security Fairness Act was signed in early 2025, and it repealed two provisions that used to reduce or even eliminate Social Security benefits for people with government pensions. Those were the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision. So if you've spent your entire career in public service and were told at some point that Social Security wasn't going to be as big of a benefit as it is for the others, well, good news. That has changed. You may be entitled to benefits you were told you would never fully see. And that is not a small thing. That's a big planning item worth a real conversation. So let's talk about that first gap, the pension and Social Security tax overlap. Most people with pensions walk into retirement feeling secure. Steady income, no market risk, a check every month for life. That confidence is completely understandable and in many ways well earned. But there's a tax dynamic many retirees never fully anticipate. And when it catches them off guard, well, those taxes can add up year after year. So here's the foundation. Your pension is taxable as ordinary income. For most retirees, every dollar is fully taxed because the employer funded the entire plan on a pre-tax basis. So you're looking at taxable income from day one. But you probably knew that. That alone is manageable. But here's where it gets more expensive. Say your pension pays $100,000 a year. That puts you in a solid tax bracket on its own. Now, you turn on Social Security and add another $40,000. Something happens next that catches people off guard. Your Social Security benefit starts out tax-free, but once your income crosses certain thresholds, up to 85% of it can become taxable. So that $40,000 isn't just additional income. It actually triggers over $34,000 in taxable Social Security benefits on top of your retirement taxes. So here's what makes this worth addressing early. Most people turn on both income streams without ever stopping to ask whether there was a smarter sequence. They retire, the pension starts, they hit 62 or 67, and they claim Social Security, and that's it. No coordination, no planning, just default. Now, what I do with my clients in this situation is this. Before Social Security enters the picture, we calculate exactly what tax bracket the pension alone creates. Then we look at how much Social Security becomes taxable at different claiming ages based on the total combined income. Then, and this is where it gets interesting, we run scenarios to see whether delaying Social Security while drawing down from other accounts first could keep them in a lower bracket for years later. It also creates an opportunity to look at pre-tax accounts like IRAs and 401ks and whether strategically pulling from those accounts now before required minimum distributions forces your hand later can smooth out the tax picture across your full retirement. Sometimes that approach yields big savings. Sometimes it doesn't change much. But the worst outcome is never running the numbers at all because you will never know what was available to you. So if you're watching this and have been realizing that this has never been mapped out for you, you're not alone. Most pension holders I meet have never seen their pension and their Social Security modeled together from a tax and income planning standpoint. And that's exactly what we do at Securus Financial. So I've put a link in the description below where you can schedule a complimentary 20-minute session with me. No products, no pitch, just you're discussing your personal situation and where the real opportunities might be. So click the link below and let's find out. Now, the second gap is your claiming decision is different when you have a pension. This one surprises almost everyone because the advice they have heard was never built for their specific situation. The standard guidance is to delay as long as possible. Wait until 70, maximize your monthly Social Security check. That advice was designed for a specific type of retiree, one without guaranteed income, who has to draw down their investment portfolio every month until they wait for Social Security. Now, the research has shown that retirees without predictable income streams are far more vulnerable to sequence of return risks and behavioral mistakes during that waiting period. For them, delaying can be costly in ways that go beyond the math. But you have a pension. That changes the entire framework, and it changes it in a way that most advisors never address. Here's what almost no one talks about. So now when you add a pension to the equation, you already have a significant base of guaranteed income. And as I mentioned earlier, once you also begin collecting Social Security, your combined income, what the IRS calls provisional income for Social Security, can push a substantial portion of your Social Security benefit into taxable territory. So the question is no longer simply, how do I get the biggest check? The real question is, what is the most tax efficient way to sequence your income? Here's what that actually looks like in practice. So take a retiree with a $100,000 pension deciding when to claim Social Security. If they delay to age 70 and receive $3,500 a month, that income stacked on top of their pension will push them deep into the provisional income thresholds where 85% of their Social Security benefit becomes taxable. Every dollar of that larger check is working harder than they expected and not in their favor. For some retirees in this position, the years between retirement and claiming, particularly if they retire before age 70, represent a window to do Roth conversions, tax management planning. And this allows them to restructure their financial picture before Social Security starts. Because once that income begins, that window closes. Now, this is not a case against delaying, and it is not a case for claiming early. It's simply a case for understanding your specific income picture before you file anything. And maximizing your income and minimizing your taxes is not the only thing you have to think of. If you die before your spouse's income stream will depend significantly on your Social Security survivor benefit. That benefit is directly tied to your benefit amount, so the stakes are real. So if your health history suggests a shorter time horizon, that changes the math and completely changes the conversation. Having a pension puts you in a fundamentally different position than the retiree that general Social Security advice was written for. The goal is not the largest number on paper. So having a pension puts you in a fundamentally different position than the typical retiree that general Social Security advice was written for. Your goal is not the largest number on paper. Your goal is keeping the most income in your pocket. And this brings us to the third planning gap: income stacking and why it quietly costs retirees the most. And the reason it is so dangerous is that it builds slowly, almost invisibly, until the window to do any meaningful planning has already closed. So here's the scenario. You retire, your pension starts and Social Security turns on. Then somewhere around age 73 or 75, depending on when you were born, required minimum distributions begin. These are IRS mandated withdrawals from your 401k and IRA, whether you need the money or not. Suddenly, you have 3 separate streams of fully taxable income all running at the same time. You have your pension, you have your Social Security benefits, which now up to 85% are subject to taxation, and you have your required minimum distributions. Stack those together and you can find yourself in a much higher tax bracket, and in some cases paying even more taxes in retirement than you ever did while you were working. Now, most people assume retirement means a lower tax bracket, and honestly, for a lot of retirees that may be true, but when you have a pension, Social Security, and pre-tax accounts all stacking income at once, that assumption can quietly work against you for decades if no one maps it out. So what actually works? Well, the retirees I've seen navigate this well all do one thing differently. They treat the years between retirement and when Social Security and required minimum distributions begin as one of the most valuable tax planning windows they will ever have. During those gap years, when income is temporarily lower, they run what are called Roth conversions. That means moving money from a pre-tax IRA account into a tax-free Roth account, paying the tax now at a lower rate so that future withdrawals come out completely tax-free. They pull strategically from pre-tax accounts before they are forced to, and they deliberately fill up the lower tax brackets on their own terms before the government forces the issue. The goal is not to eliminate taxes. It's just simply to stop letting income pile up and unnecessarily spike your taxes all at once. Instead of everything turning on in the same time and pushing you to a higher bracket for the next 10 to 20 years, you are smoothing the curve. You're taking control of when and how much you pay and keeping more of it working for you across your retirement lifetime. Every dollar paid unnecessarily in taxes is a dollar that is not compounding, not providing income, and not available when you need it 20 years from now. And even worse, you're tipping the IRS. But retirees who plan proactively in these gap years consistently come out ahead on long-term tax efficiency. Those who don't, well, they often spend years wishing they had had this conversation earlier. So, having a pension and Social Security is a genuine advantage. You have more guaranteed income than most retirees could ever dream of. But that advantage comes with a level of complexity that most people and most basic online calculators are simply not built to handle. The tax overlap can catch you off guard from the moment retirement begins. The claiming decision requires thinking that generic advice skips entirely. And income stacking can quietly push you into higher tax brackets for decades if no one ever lays it out for you on paper. So if you have a pension and you want to see how all this fits together for your specific situation, here's what I want you to do. Click the link in the description below to schedule a complimentary session with me, where we will discuss your personal situation and show exactly where your opportunities are and where the risks are hiding. There's no obligation, no pressure, just clarity. Because the decisions you make in the next few years around these three areas can add up to an enormous difference over the course of a 30-year retirement. And you deserve to make those decisions with the full picture in front of you, with full clarity. The link is in the description below. I'll see you in the next video.